Okay, so first I wanted to start off by addressing Mulan's, I guess, topic about El Chapo escaping prison in Mexico. That is, of course, in Mexico, not in the United States, and we're talking about getting rid of the death penalty in the United States, in which they would be placed in a prison in the United States. To further that, those who receive life in prison in the United States without parole can actually suffer equally or more than those on death row. The Marshall Project has published an article on a prisoner named William Blake, who was sentenced to life in prison without parole on the sole reason that the judge presiding over his case expressed regret that New York did not have the death penalty, and so Blake could not have been sentenced to death. This was in 1987. For the past 30 years, Blake has lived in extreme isolation in a 7-by-9 cell, being fed through a slot and a solid steel door, and some days not even being allowed to exercise for his 1 hour allotted time, which would be done again alone in a small and barren pen. Recently, Blake, who is now 50 years old, describes how being in a special housing unit in New York State prison has affected him. Blake states, "If I try to imagine what kind of death, even a slow one, would be worse than 25 years, or 30 years now, in jail in the box, and I have tried to imagine it, I can come up with nothing." He wrote, "Dying couldn't take but a short time if you or the state were to kill me. In SHU, I have died 1,000 internal deaths." This shows that receiving life in prison is a far worse punishment than the death penalty. Okay, so then on my next point, according to the American Civil Liberties Union of Northern California, no one sentenced to life with parole has ever been released on parole. Although it is possible, it has not been done in California or in any other state. Prisoners sentenced to life in prison without parole actually remain in prison for the rest of their lives and die in prison. This shows that life without parole is just as permanent of a penalty as the death penalty. Also, ACLUNC.org states, "All sentences, including the death penalty, are equally subject to clemency from the governor," which is another way they can try to reverse their sentence. However, no Democratic or Republican governor has ever granted clemency to prisoners serving life in prison without parole in California, and no such prisoner has ever been released on parole. This proves even more so that prisoners with life without parole have never successfully fought their case and proved their sentence to be reduced or reversed. If you get a sentence for life without parole, you remain in prison until the day you die. ACLUNC.org also states that when prisoners are sentenced to prison until death, they begin serving their sentence immediately. Life without parole in prison allows victim survivors to move on rather than keeping them trapped in decades of court hearings and waiting for an execution to occur. For this reason, the surviving victims of murder often feel that the death penalty system only prolongs their pain and does not provide the resolution they need. While the finality of life without parole in prison sentences allow them to move on knowing justice is being served. So because of life in prison without parole being a worse punishment than the death penalty, and also because it's eliminating the need for even more death, this is why I believe me and my partner have the better case in this claim. That is all.